All right, so chapter 10, Thinking and Cognition. This is really the first chapter entirely devoted to the cognitive perspective, when we really take a look at all the things involved with thinking and processing of information. Cognition is defined as the mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. This is a process we oftentimes take for granted. It's not until our thinking almost gets in the way of our ability to live a good quality of life that we take a look at how it breaks down. Cognitive psychologists study the mental activities, including the logical and sometimes illogical ways in which we create concepts, solve problems, make decisions, and form judgments. And really that's what we take a look at in this chapter. We look at the basic building blocks of cognition, which regards concepts. We look at solving problems. We look at decision making and forming judgments. Starting off with basic concepts. Concepts are mental groupings of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. And we create concepts from the time we're born, and these concepts are kind of like the broad category. If we think about hierarchical organization, concepts are the broad category that we include all of our life experiences. So when we talked about cognitive maps in previous chapters, and we talked about schemas in previous chapters, this all relates in how we mentally group information. When we think of a concept, there are a lot of times specific examples that come to mind. These are referred to as prototypes. It's a mental image or best example of a particular category. So on the previous slide, you saw keys, or a picture of a key. And when I say the category key, oftentimes, car keys will come to mind, house keys will come to mind, maybe keys that open up locker combos. Maybe it's a skeleton key or a trunk key, a filing cabinet key. Those are prototypes of the category of keys. On the right, you saw kind of a space age looking chair. I'll pull it back up again. When I use the concept chair, there are all kinds of prototypes that come to mind. If it's a desk chair, a height chair, a dentist chair, a lazy boy recliner, whatever best example or mental image that comes to mind is called a prototype. Kind of funny that when you consider like the box of Kleenex that you see on this screen. When I say tissue, oftentimes we refer to tissue as Kleenex, which is actually a prototype of tissues. We don't say Puffs, we don't say Up and Up or other brands of tissues. We often just use the general statement Kleenex. But a prototype is any kind of mental image or best example that you have of a category. Sometimes when we're developing concepts, we form some with definitions. We use mental images or specific examples. One situation where we might encounter something like a category of a bird that doesn't match our already existing prototype can be confusing, like that of a penguin. Penguins don't match our already existing prototype of a bird because they don't fly and they don't have wings. I was talking to my son Tommy when we were reading a book together, and we came across a page in a book called Under the Sea that had seahorses on it, and he was really confused because he didn't think that looked like a fish, and its name was a seahorse. So we understand that our concepts can change based on life experiences. The next section of the book talks about problem-solving methods. Problem-solving is something we deal with on a regular basis. We're constantly trying to find solutions to problems that we have. And sometimes it's tough. We don't have an easy time finding a way of attaining that goal. So we go through different methods, whether it's trial and error. If you think of entrepreneurs like Thomas Edison and how many times he failed before he came across solutions to the problems. One way that we do this is by using algorithms. These are step-by-step procedures. They guarantee a solution to the problem. What's nice about algorithms is you have that guaranteed solution at the end. A downside to algorithms is sometimes they can be timely. It can be monotonous, but if you follow the guidelines, these step-by-step procedures, you're going to find a solution. This YouTube video is funny if you get a chance to watch it. It's from the Big Bang Theory, where Sheldon has a friendship algorithm. A heuristic is a simple thinking strategy that allows us to make judgments and solve problems in a more timely manner, more efficiently. It's oftentimes faster, but the downside is that sometimes you can't guarantee a solution to the problem. If you think of an example in terms of language, you hear the rule I before E except after C. Well, there's always exceptions, whether it's the word neighbor or way. Those are exceptions. So even if you have a strategy, a heuristic, sometimes it's not foolproof. We oftentimes do use heuristics over algorithms because we are definitely, we like the speedy, faster route. This is an example of using an algorithm versus a heuristic. If you look at this anagram, oftentimes if you try and figure out what the word is and unscramble it, you will use a heuristic. You'll exclude unlikely letter combinations, you reduce the number of options, and by trial and error, you may figure out what the word is. If you were to use an algorithm, each letter in each position, you would find that 907,200 options, you would stumble across the right answer. If you haven't figured it out by now, it is psychology. The supermarket example on page 398 is just referencing, for example, if I were to give someone a list and say, I need you to go to the grocery store. If you used an algorithm to find the 10 items, you'd walk up and down every single aisle until you crossed off all 10 items and you got everything that was on the list. But oftentimes we use heuristics. We know the dairies in certain areas, the produce, the frozen section, the bakery, and we don't need to go down every single aisle. You can get all 10 items on the list at a faster pace. Insight is a sudden and novel realization of the solution to a problem. When you're problem solving, sometimes you get stumped, but then all of a sudden the answer comes to you, and it does provide you a very nice sense of satisfaction. So that aha moment, when the light bulb flashes on after struggling with a problem, is called insight. Some people will find this to be true with jokes. Someone says a joke, they don't get it right away, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, yeah, that's right, and they get the joke. Studies have revealed that your insight, the aha experience, is active in your right temporal cortex, and that the time between not knowing the solution and realizing it is only about 0.3 seconds, so it does actually happen quite quickly. Another section that the book talks about is solving problems. And one of those is defined as confirmation bias. This is a tendency to search for information that confirms one's preconceptions. We oftentimes do seek evidence that verifies our ideas more eagerly than we seek evidence that might refute them. For example, if I believed that women were better drivers than men, I might only search for information to confirm that, meaning I only look for accidents where men were the cause of it, or if people are speeding and get pulled over or are reckless and are pulled over, I might only pay attention to the ones where the man is sitting in the driver's seat. In our book, they use the example of the Iraq War. We were so certain that it was important for us to invade Iraq because we were going to come across weapons of mass destruction, when in all actuality, they weren't there. But all of the president's advisors were looking at the evidence that would support why going into Iraq would be a good idea. This is a little brain teaser from the book. It's the matchstick problem. How would you arrange these 6 matches to form 4 equilateral triangles? Well, if you attempt to do this little activity, you might come into some kinds of frustration because you're not able to find the answer in a timely manner. I'm going to skip ahead. What you find is a lot of times people don't look at it two-dimensionally. and they might exhibit what's called fixation, which is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. And it is an impediment to problem solving. So fixation is kind of the overall heading, where functional fixedness and mental set are like a subcategory of it. So once you were stuck on the matchsticks being two-dimensional, it was hard to view them as three-dimensional. You'll have to look in your book for the answer if that doesn't make sense. Functional fixedness is the inability to solve a problem because it's viewed only in terms of its usual function. And then we do a little activity. We did one in class where I had a bunch of different items on the front bookshelf, and you got into groups of 2 or 3. And you brought the item back to your desk, and you had to come up with a different function other than its original use. So, for example, I used the bubble wand that was in my memory box that we did in our Chapter 9 unit. And a lot of people came up with original ideas for using the bubble wand. Some said it could be like an earring holder. Some said it could be a decoration in a fish tank. So coming up with some kind of new function for an item means that you've overcome functional fixedness. Let's say I were walking outside and it started raining and I didn't have an umbrella, but I did have a newspaper under my arm. If I got wet and was like, crap, I don't have an umbrella, I would be suffering from functional fixedness. If I overcame it by using the newspaper to cover up over my head, one would say I was overcoming functional fixedness. Another example of fixation is what's called a mental set. This is a tendency to approach a problem in a particular way, which is often a way that has been successful in the past. So if I were to say, hey, connect all the dots you see here using 4 straight lines, the lines can intersect, but you can't lift up your pencil, and all dots must have a line run through it. If you started doing this activity and struggled and were very frustrated, you might be suffering from a mental set because you tried a strategy that worked for you in the past and it didn't work, and then you gave up. Well, if you've seen this one before or you've done the reading, you find that there is a solution, but it requires you to think outside the box. Literally, you draw a line and you have to extend it past the dots. Let's say you start it here. You go up 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, there's your answer. Well, that's where we're going to end today with our screencast. Have a good one.